Welcome to my review of the Tokina 11-16mm F2.8. Now there are two versions of this lens. I will list out the specs on the top right hand side for you. This is the version 1. The version 2 has the built-in focus motor for all of the mounts. This particular one is for the A mount cameras. Now moving in closer, looking at the body, we can see quite a nice build on this Tokina. Actually, they have a good reputation for fairly solid and chunky feeling lenses. The case on this is metal, and you have thick, chunky rubber grips on both the zoom and focus ring. Now you just push down towards you to enter the manual focus, and then you can flip it back up to enter autofocus again. Looking at the front lens element, we have a 77mm thread on this, so you see the dome shape, which is very common on ultra wide angle lenses. If you're going to fit a filter, I would strongly suggest you get a low profile slim filter, because it could introduce more corner darkening and fall off on the edges. That's quite important. Lens hood that's supplied, just click in, align the markers and snaps on bayonet style. It's a pretty good hood. With this lens, definitely recommend using the hood. Any ultra wide angle lens can be susceptible to flares, so well worth using them, and you can reverse it and stash it on the lens if you wish. Looking at the mount now, as you'd expect for a lens of this price, it's not horribly expensive, but it's not a super cheap lens. We have a metal mount, we have the contacts there. This lens is screw driven. You can see the slot moving around here when I focus in manual focus. Now for the Canon version, that will have the in-lens AF motor, as all of their lenses do. Look at the top now, we have the focus window, and you'll see the travel for the zoom. Quick focus test. It's actually quite quick focusing, but this will vary depending on the camera body that you're using. It's a fairly short throw for the focus, and on the underside we just have the serial number and some more markings. Certainly a nice lens in the hand, feels good. It's not particularly big, but with the hood on, that does make it a bit larger in terms of the girth at the front end. As you can see, a top shot here, giving you an idea of the profile. And a quick look at the front. Right, now outside, I'll just demonstrate here the range. Obviously 11-16mm isn't the biggest range. You're still at a wide angle even at the 16mm. You're just at an ultra wide at 11, so you do have a fairly short range with this lens. So we're going to look at some shots outside now. This is an f8, which could be considered the optimal aperture for the lens. And zooming in, we can see we have good details even into the corners. Now this is a raw file. I haven't done any special sharpening for this, even so we've still got good resolution across the image. I'm certainly quite happy with the lens in this regard in terms of the sharpness. Now outside, this one is at a small aperture around f13. Once you go past f8, you start to get some diffraction, about f11, f13 onwards, and it starts to get much more noticeable after that. As you can see, the resolution is still good, but the bite has dropped off a touch, so there's really no reason to use smaller than f8 unless you have a specific reason to. Now you're probably wondering how the lens does wide open at f2.8, and the answer is quite well, considering it is an ultra wide angle lens and there will be some drop off in sharpness on the peripheral edges and in the corners. As we move into the corner here, we can see it's dropped off a bit. It's not horribly blurred though, and we've got good sharpness around the central area. Likewise on the left side here, it's dropped off a bit of blurring. I'm not unhappy with the lens. It's certainly usable at f2.8. If you can drop it down to f4, so much the better. That's when it really starts to pick up across the edges and corners. So certainly usable at f2.8 if you have to use it at that speed. The other advantage is, of course, the autofocus will get more light, which will help focusing. Now, again, purple fringing. Here we can use the tool to try and remove that. Doesn't always work, so you might have to go in manually and make an adjustment yourself on that. Looking at the test shot I've taken here, wouldn't normally take this type of shot, but it gives us a good demonstration of sharpness distribution across the image, and it does a good job. Stopped down, f8, very happy with that. Now you'll notice that there is some distortion, and with this lens, is like many other ultra wide angles, it's the same situation, but the distortion is quite simple to correct. It's not a moustache type distortion. There is a profile included here which we can use for the distortion too. So it's a simple distortion which is quite easy to correct. You'll also see there's some corner darkening, bit of fall off. That's more obvious at the faster apertures, not so much at smaller apertures at f8, but there is still some. I wouldn't use this correction all the time. It really depends on the type of shot that you're taking. You can go in and manually make an adjustment yourself if you wish. It's not something that I would automatically put on for every type of shot. You will lose a small bit of field of view with the distortion correction on Lightroom here, but you can use other tools to remove distortion and darkening of the corners if you wish. Now, one of the reasons I got this lens was for interior photography, and it's specifically very good for this type of photography because you may be in a smaller confined area and you need to have a large field of view. Now, yes, you could take multiple shots and stitch them together, but really it's going to be a big time saver for this type of photography to have an ultra wide angle lens. Now you can see that there are some issues again with the purple fringing, and we'll move in onto the edges here. So even when the lens is stopped down a bit, there's a bit, it doesn't completely clear up. It's less obvious in the central areas, although you can sometimes get a small amount in high contrast parts of the image. Now most of the time the tool in Lightroom does a pretty good job in removing that. You can see that's cleared up and it's also disappeared there. Or you can go in manually and use the correction tool. Just be careful with that, because sometimes if you don't quite get the right colour hue, it can remove purples and things, and if you have that in the image, then that could obviously degrade it. Another example here with the chromatic aberration, just showing you the effect of it removed. It's a pretty quick fix, slightly distortion, those are the two weaker points of the lens. But in most ways I'm actually quite happy with this lens. Good performance. This shot just gives you an example of the exaggerated perspective that you can get with an ultra wide angle lens. It's not a particularly interesting shot, but it shows you just how much of a large field of view you can get in. It's certainly not the first lens that I suggest someone to buy. It's perhaps more of a specialist lens, but it's quite a fair price. I wasn't unhappy with the price on this. It was about £440 I think I paid for it, and the optical performance is very good. So it's certainly one that I could recommend to users who need ultra wide angle lens.